Hi, I'm going to talk about war, death, and genocide on this channel and give book recommendations on those things because that's what I know. I used to teach about the Holocaust. I have hundreds of books on it, and I have a stack of books here that are suitable to teach your medium-sized kids about the Holocaust. I wouldn't go under 10 for these books. However, some kids have a high maturity level and some kids don't. Use your discretion for your kids. First up is Hitler Youth by Susan Campbell Bartoletti. This is a really easy to understand book. The information is not dense and there are a lot of pictures. This is really relevant for kids as well because this is about the brainwashing that kids in the Reich had to go through. So the Hitler Youth origins date back to 1922, and then it was renamed to Hitler Youth in 1926. He wasn't even chancellor until 1933. So from 1922 until 1945, when the war ended, they were training kids to believe in Nazi ideology. It was brainwashing. And in the late 20s was the end of all other boys' programs. Like they didn't have Boy Scouts, they didn't have anything else. It was just Hitler Youth. You had to go through it. And then girls had to go through the League of German Girls, which was to train them to be good housewives, maids, nannies, and serve the Reich. There's a whole series of books called Holocaust Biographies by Carrie Callahan. They are designed for kids to read. There is Albert Speer, Anne Frank, Dr. Josef Mengele, Emanuel Ringelblum, Heinrich Müller, Mordecai. I cannot pronounce that name, but this is him, Mordecai. He was a hero of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. Pastor Andrei Trukmi and Reinhard Heydrich. These ones are easy to digest for kids. Of course, Night by Elie Wiesel. Now, Night is usually read in school at some point. I did not teach it to my high schoolers because this is meant for middle school. Like, that's the reading level of it. As a writer, an English teacher, and a reader, I am not a fan of the writing because Wiesel was not born to be a writer, so it's not written fantastically, but it is a really heartbreaking story and you will cry and it is good. I just prefer more advanced writing, if you know what I mean. But this is good for kids to read. Now, you might be thinking I would recommend The Diary of Anne Frank, but I do not. It's fine if you would like to read that or have your kid read it. However, as a teacher, it doesn't help kids gain empathy, which is why they teach it. Even though it's not about the war, it's not about the Holocaust, it's about a little girl, it's a diary. That's what it is. The first couple diary entries, I have a little bit of tidbits of information about what happened, but she loses the diary by the time she is taken to a camp and dies. So it's not about a Holocaust experience. It is a diary of a little girl who is mad at her mom and stuck with her family in a small area and doesn't know what's going on with herself, the world, or her budding sexuality. And some parts of the book are redacted when they teach it in school because she had some feelings that she was attracted to women and art history, like sculptures of Venus and whatnot, and they redact those parts when they teach it, which, par for course. The Dressmakers of Auschwitz by Lucy Adlington, I would recommend for 7th or 8th graders. It reads like a novel, but it is the true story of 25 women who were supposed to and did make dresses for prominent Nazi officers and Nazi officers' wives. And there were women Nazis, so they were supposed to design dresses for these people and be in really intimate situations with them, you know, cutting and fitting their dresses. And it reads like a novel. It's good. The Sunflower by Simon Wiesenthal. So Simon survived Nazi concentration camps, and at the end of the war, a dying Nazi asked him for forgiveness, and he said nothing. He wondered if that was the right thing to do, and after the war, he became a Nazi hunter. He spent his time and money hunting Nazis who had escaped justice. He worked with the FBI, the CIA, and Mossad, the intelligence agency of Israel. And he wrote down everyone's responses when he asked 53 different men and women of all walks of life, including Holocaust survivors and other genocide survivors, like from Bosnia, Cambodia, China, and Tibet. And their experiences remind us that everyone is human, and it kind of puts you in the position of what would you do? Would you forgive a Nazi? It's really easy to read, it's easy to digest for kids, but perhaps not elementary. And I say not for elementary only because usually elementary school kids do not have the emotional intelligence to understand why somebody would forgive someone who tries to commit a genocide. It's a complicated matter, as are genocides. To Look a Nazi in the Eye by Jordana Leibovitz. She is the granddaughter of Holocaust survivors, and when she was 19, she attended the war crimes trials for Oskar Gröning, who was the concentration camp bookkeeper at Auschwitz. He attended the trial. He stood trial in 2015, so he was old by this time. And he was complicit in the deaths of more than 300,000 Jewish people. And Jordana attended that trial. And this is easy for kids to understand, but also make sure that the emotional intelligence is there. The Good Doctor of Warsaw by Elizabeth Gifford. It is about Dr. Janusz Korczak. I might have said that wrong. As best as I got, it's Polish. He was a doctor who took responsibility of the orphanage inside the Warsaw Ghetto. And this reads like a novel because there's a love story intertwined in it of two people who worked with Dr. Korczak. But it might not be suitable for young kids because it is dense. And the writing is a little bit more mature. Like the reading level is not elementary. Okay, so up until now, all of those books have been nonfiction, all true, things that happened. Now I have some fictional books. This one, it says it's the true story of Hansel and Gretel by Louise Murphy, but it is a novel. It is about how a pair of children were left by their parents to find safety in a forest. They had to change their names because their real names would reveal that they were Jewish, so they renamed themselves Hansel and Gretel. They wandered through the woods until they're taken in by an old woman who was called a witch. It's a clever retelling of the story of Hansel and Gretel, but also, you know, building empathy with kids who had to survive it. Like, if you're a kid yourself and you're reading this about other kids that this happened to, you build empathy quicker, which is why all of the books up until now, like any that are about kids, are good for kids. You know what I mean. This book is called Mouse. It's not a book, it's a comic book. Let's see who wrote it. Mouse by Art Spielman. So his parents survived the Holocaust and he wrote a comic book. This is a really big comic book. It's really well known. It is easy to understand, easy to read. For kids who like comic books, this is a really good way to learn about it because it's visual as well. So mice are Jewish people because the Nazis dehumanized them and called them rats. So the mice are being chased by the cats, the Nazis. And like I said, just make sure that the emotional intelligence is there for kids to understand what the context really is. It's not just a silly comic about mice and cats. Prisoner B83087 by Alan Gratz. It is a novel. It is super easy to understand and follow. I don't even know how I got this because it says uncorrected proof, not for sale. I don't know where I acquired this book. I didn't read it. I skimmed through it because, again, it is for kids and it's a novel. I'm not the biggest fan of fiction books because it's not true. It's not real. So I can't make myself care about something that's not real, except for one of the next couple books I'm going to show you. But this is good for kids to understand what somebody their age may have gone through as a prisoner. Mishling by Affinity Konar. This is a novel. I did like it. It is about kids who were experimented on by Dr. Josef Mengele at Auschwitz. Some of the kids are twins. Some of the kids have abnormalities. One kid, I believe, had a tail stub. So they experimented on people who had abnormalities or physical deformities just as a way to understand and torture people. Mishling means half-breed, so someone who was half Jewish. It is a derogatory term. but this is a novel. I would not recommend it for elementary because of the emotional intelligence. However, 6th grade and up, that'll be good. And finally, The Book Thief by Markus Zusak. So his parents were Austrian and German. They moved to Australia after the war, but I don't think they were like victims or affected by the war. But Markus Zusak is a writer, and he's written a couple of really popular books, but this one, The Book Thief. This is written from the perspective of death. Like as a being, as a sentient being, death is watching over this little girl who becomes a book thief. She steals from like the mayor's wife's book library and in their house. The end is really heart-wrenching, even though I know that it's fiction. I know it is. I know. As I was reading it, I knew it wasn't real, but I was crying for a while. And this is one of the first like fond memories I have of reading a fictional book, to be honest. And the protagonist of this book, she can't be older than 10 years old. So it's one of those stories where a little kid can gain empathy because the main character is the same age as them. So keep that part in mind. I can't find the book. I don't know where it went. I know I had to buy a second copy of it because I lent it to one of my students. We went on spring break, then COVID happened, and then she moved schools, so she never was able to return it to me. It's called Surviving the Angel of Death by Ava Moses Kaur. She was a child and a twin. Her and her twin, Miriam, survived, and the death that they witnessed and the experiments that they were put under by Dr. Yosef Mengele are really emotionally hard. Reading the book was, first of all, easy because the writing level, like the reading level is super low. It's easy for kids to read, but you need to have the emotional intelligence to handle that because that is the shit of nightmares. And as a grown-ass woman, I was crying for hours reading this book. Like I read it in one sitting because it was like captivating. Ava Moses Kaur, though, she ended up forgiving Nazis. She met and had lunch with a Nazi, not anyone who she had met before, not anyone who experimented on her, but she forgave them for what they did. And I don't know if I'm a strong enough person to do that. Like I would not be able to in her position. But it's hard. Remember to like and subscribe if you liked this. I will go over more book recommendations later on. I'll do more books about other things besides the Holocaust as well, because I read a lot. That's just some of them currently. Those are the ones I've kept over the last couple years, the physical copies. So yeah, I'll be talking about war, death, genocide, all of the bad stuff in life. So follow along.